Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hows and Whys of Buying Land Upstate. I'm Angelica Ferguson. I'm the head of sales of the Upstate Curious Team of Keller Williams Hudson Valley North. I'm a licensed real estate salesperson. With me is Brooke Murray and Hillary Colos, both also licensed real estate salespersons. And we're going to talk about buying land today. I think we're going to start off with why. Yeah.
Yep. Why? Why do it? Why not just buy a house?
Yeah. So we came up with a few reasons why we thought a lot of the clients that we work with have been interested in buying land. But if anybody has something, that we don't mention, throw it in the comments or in the chat, and we could talk about everyone's questions and comments at the end. I think we came up with some big reasons. Obviously, one would be, because you want to build a house. Because you don't feel like the market has what you're looking for, or for whatever reason, you want to buy land and build a house. Some other reasons might be you want a place to go camping. You just want a private escape. You want to do some kind of farming. You want to have some other kind of commercial venture. You want to build lots of houses or have a little community or something like that. Or maybe you just want to go hunting. There's a lot of reasons to buy land we've encountered with a lot of our clients. And I think we'll probably focus on buying land with the intention of building a house today, right?
Yeah, that's what most people come to us for. I think that makes sense.
What's at the top of our list?
Well, just included in the why, I think we wanted to talk about maybe just a little bit of an overview. And a lot of people do come to us either initially or also after looking for a while at houses and think that it will save them money / maybe time. So maybe we could talk about the overall cost and timeline, why it would make sense or why it might not make sense to buy land. But
yeah, so in terms of the timeline, the transaction timeline can be shorter. If you're buying a piece of land, it's generally a cash deal. And all you really need is clear title. So we'll get into some other contingencies that might come into a land purchase. But that particular transaction timeline could be shorter. But then the time to being in an actual house is obviously much longer. So at this point, most builders up here have a waiting list that's a year or two out. And so you have to be willing to not be in your house for up to several years from the time you buy the piece of land. There's some situations we work with a developer called Neville House. That's we're going to be launching some properties for them. We have one in Sullivan County right now, but they kind of have a machine in progress, and so they can build faster than other people, and as soon as you buy a lot with them, they can start building your house. So a situation like that could have an expedited timeline, which would be great. But for most people, you're kind of looking to design a custom house yourself and build something like that. And so you want to find an architect, possibly find a builder, and all of that adds to the timeline. So you might be even designing the house with the architect or the builder for up to a year before you ever even have the plans to start building the house. So the timeline is much longer to when you're going to be in the house.
I think we got a question in the chat. If we are referring to, okay.
What about cost? I know obviously it'll depend on size and materials and finishes and all of that, but is it cheaper? Too broad of a question, but is it cheaper? Should I just build a house? Will that save me money in the long run?
Probably not. Building costs are extremely high right now. There's obviously supply chain issues that I think everyone has heard something about, and that has increased the cost for everything. Labor costs are up dramatically. The sort of great resignation has affected more than just white collar jobs. And it's really hard to find construction labor, actually. So a lot of people are working with crews that are smaller than they would, ideally have. And so they're only able to do like one project at a time versus having, multiple builds going at once. And of course, the labor costs are up. So it's really, you're not going to save any money by building a house, unfortunately, right now. I think it's just right now, we're kind of looking at average per square foot cost to build a house being around $350 per square foot and up.
You may not save time or money, but you end up with a really potentially like customized, unless you're buying from a kit or something.
Yeah, like if it's something like yeah, if you get what you want. So you sacrifice the time and you pay a little extra to have your dream house. So for a lot of people, that's totally worth it.
And then there's other things to consider about the building process, and if you need to get a driveway put in, or how far it might be from electric, and if you have to install a septic system, and the cost for those things are quite costly at times, depending on the situation.
Yeah, so the site work costs are something that a lot of people who want to build a house are not aware of at all. Like you kind of know you have to put in a driveway, but you don't factor that in as being a substantial cost. And actually your site work cost can be about 1/3 of your total cost to build. So rather substantial. If you're starting with a piece of totally unimproved raw land, the first thing you have to do is, put in a driveway so you can get from the road to your building site. Driveways are very, very, very expensive. So you could be spending $40,000 to $60,000 just on a driveway. And then you have to clear the site for where you're going to put the house. You probably want, at least an acre cleared to like put your house on. So that's an expense. Then you have to grade and excavate the building site. If you want something like a full basement or a walkout basement, like those are things that are going to affect the total cost of that site prep. You need to bring electric in, as Brooke mentioned. So what you're going to do is pull that from the nearest pole that's on the road. If you have put in a 1/4 mile driveway, now you have to trench that electric from the street to a 1/4 mile to your house. So that's very significant cost. You have excavation costs there to trench the electric if you want it underground. I guess you could put in poles too, but poles are expensive too. The electric company is going to charge you for each pole that they have to put in. So bringing in electric, that's very expensive. Then you have like your well and your septic system. So I think unless you have a house upstate already, you probably have only dealt with like municipal sewer and water. But out here in the country, you have to get your water and deal with your sewage yourself. So you have to install a septic system for sewage, and you need to drill a well in order to get water. So those are expenses as well. Wells around $10,000 to $20,000. Depends on how deep you have to drill to hit good water. And then you may need to add a filtration system if the water is not, great. There's a lot of minerals in the water upstate. So that's something that most people are going to have to put in. Septic systems, one of my favorite topics. Minimum, you're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 to put in a basic in-ground septic system. And then the sky is the limit from there. I think Hillary has a fun number for some clients putting in a septic system right now.
Yeah, sometimes if it's too rocky or something in the ground, you need to bring in fill or soil that can actually percolate the liquids from septic. And it can be a lot to both bring in that soil and pay for the soil. And I think one quote we got was over $90,000.
Over $90,000. So, with the driveway and all of that stuff, and like for what people want, where they want a house that's very private and set back from the road, so you don't hear any road noise and don't see any neighbors. Like we're already at $150,000 right now. We don't even have a house yet. We just have a place to put the house. So that's a huge cost that a lot of people don't know about.
I think we had talked also about getting a survey done. If it's not already done, that could be a couple.
Oh yeah, so you have to have a survey if you're going to build. So the surveyor is going to put the site of the house on the property, and you have to ensure that you're only building on property that you own. So the way to do that is to get a survey done, where a person goes out and they read the meets and bounds that are dictated on the deed, and they make sure that everything is measured out, and they show you exactly where your property is on a map. So you need that in order to build. So hopefully if you're buying a piece of land, there's an existing survey that you could then update. because that'll cost less than doing a brand new survey, but there may not be one. You're not entitled to it. If there is one, it's actually considered the personal property of whoever paid for the survey. So likely you have to get your own. At this point, it's taking upwards of 8 weeks to get a survey done, and it costs upwards of $2,000.
And the survey will also show you if you have wetlands on the property that you need to build away from, and there's certain restrictions for that, right? And then there's a certain amount of road frontage that you need access to if you are planning to build more than one dwelling unit, right? So if you have those things are things to keep in mind as well when looking.
Basically everything we just talked about, it's like all the things you need to do, but it's also all the things that can add value to land, right? And I think Lindsay was mentioning in the chat, you know, what to look for when buying land. And so if any of this work has already been done, that could be really helpful, but it also means you might pay more for that parcel.
Yeah, so you might look and be like, why are these two 5-acre parcels like priced so differently, but one of them already has a driveway and a well and like a cleared building site, and the other one is just wooded. So there's going to be a very large price discrepancy between those two things.
Another thing, I might be jumping here, but another thing to consider is like, this is actually a good time of year, as is the winter, to go and look at land. If it's especially wooded, you'll have more visibility to what the surface looks like and what kind of views you might see in the winter time. So if there are sort of distant mountain views, or you could see a range or other homes nearby, and that's important to you to have that privacy, you won't be able to really get that sense when it's summertime and all of the trees and the ground is just filled with green. So this is like the ideal sort of time of year to get in there and walk the land.
Yeah, there's going to be less brambles and bugs as you're checking land as well. So do it in the winter.
That's a good segue to some like practical stuff about looking for land. So I think we're getting into like the how now. So those were all things to kind of look for in the land, but how to actually do it. So I'll just throw out a few things, and then Brooke, Angelica, if you have more to add. But you know, they're listed on regular sites like Realtor and Zillow, and on the Upstate Curious page as well. You can do a search. But one really important, we were talking in our prep about this, it's really important to not just go wander on other people's private land.
Considered trespassing.
Trespassing, all kinds of things can happen. And so it's always really important to make sure the listing agent knows. So if you're working with a realtor, and hopefully you are, as a buyer's agent, they would just call the listing agent and make sure it's okay. Sometimes the listing agent wants to accompany. Sometimes they ask your buyer's agent to accompany. Sometimes they say, yeah, that's fine, just go. And they'll give you a little bit of info. So always making sure that you have permission to be on the land is really important. Don't just drive by and start wandering. Bring boots. I always do that. I basically wear your boots whenever I go out anywhere these days because it's
long
so wet and
Mhm.
muddy. So bring boots or wear boots, and a hat. That's a good one. Yeah. So that
Take
you
a
can
hat.
really get out there and like look at the land. And then one other tip I have is there are a couple apps out there. Some of them are actually like hunting apps or land parcel apps. There's one called Land Glide that I've used in the past, where it'll show you the boundaries so that when you're walking the land, you can actually make sure you're staying on the property, and you know the you know, generally roughly, it could be, I guess, slightly incorrect, but that you know the boundaries. But what else?
I use one like that called Onyx Hunt, which is a hunting app, but I think both of those give you also the visibility to layer in topography, so you can get a sense of if it's a large parcel and you have no idea, you can't get in there because it's too wooded, you'll still have an idea if there's any streams that are running through, any sort of wetlands are usually marked on there as well. So those apps are extremely helpful. I think I use them every time I go out.
What do you do, Angelica, when you look
I
at
have,
land?
I have Onyx too. As real estate agents, we like use these apps all the time. So hopefully you're working with an agent to help you find a good piece of land. And you can just tell them to open their app.
Another thing that could make a land parcel for sale a little bit more valuable is if it's subdividable. So that if, you know, down the road, or if the process has already been started, sometimes I've come across land that's already been subdivided and you can buy both pieces, or it has the potential of subdivision later, which could add value if you buy it now and decide you don't want the whole thing. Those are some additional advantages if you're buying a large amount of acreage.
Or, I mean, even if it's not that large, if the subdividability is important for anyone who might want to put more than one residence on a property. A lot of people want to create a family compound, or, buy land and build two houses and have like a friend compound or something like that. Or have one house and then have a rental or something like that. And so you'll have to check with the town to see, are you allowed to put more than one residence on a piece of land? And if it's subdividable, you could potentially subdivide, and then you would have two separate tax lots, and then you would be able to put two residences on there. So it's important to identify clearly like what your goals are from the start, and be very forthcoming about all of that with your agent, and then to call the town that is the municipality that controls the land that you want to buy, and make sure that you will be allowed to do the things that you want to do on that particular piece of land.
Yeah, zoning comes into play big time here, potentially, right?
Yeah, so zoning is basically, it's the way that a town classifies a piece of property, and what the allowable uses are with that piece of property, and the rules that go along with it. So you want to check with the town and make sure that the property is zoned to do whatever you want to do.
So once we've found the perfect piece of land or a great piece of land and that fits our criteria, and we have an accepted offer, and get into contract, there's due diligence, right? So I think we want to talk about that a little bit, like what happens once you have the land, what do you need to do to make sure, and it fits somewhat with the list that we went through before, but I'll just throw out one thing that a lot of the contracts I've seen have been contingent. So contingency is basically something that needs to happen to move forward with the contract. And if it doesn't happen, you could potentially get out of the contract but usually they've been contingent on a percolation test or a perc test, which is basically a test that tests how quickly or slowly water or liquid can move through the soil or the earth on the site. And you need to do that to make sure you can have a septic somewhere on, and you have to work with an engineer and an excavator. One or the other. It could be sort of the project manager and the main point person on that, but basically you have to work with them and figure out if it's possible to have a septic on there. So that might be one thing that's in your contract that is a contingency. And then also access to utilities, but that's usually pretty obvious right away if you have a pole nearby or within sight of your property. But what else happens once we get into like contract phase and due diligence?
You would probably do a survey at that point. That would be part of your due diligence to make sure that there's no sort of infringements upon the property lines. Also, like, I've run into situations where there was like a shed that happened to span, two parcels, and then it was the neighbor's shed. It didn't belong to the seller, and it caused an issue. And then you have to figure out, how to resolve that prior to closing. And what else happens during due diligence? Oh, you would check. So sometimes properties come with what's called a Board of Health approval for a septic system. So they've already had the septic engineering and design done. Not every county up here has a Board of Health. In some counties, you actually go through the town for your septic permit. But Ulster, Dutchess, and Columbia all have boards of health that handle the septic approval. So some parcels will be sold and they'll say it's already Board of Health approved. So that particular approval piece of paper doesn't transfer if the property sells. If it changes hands, you just have to renew it, as the new owner. But you might want to get a copy of that paperwork as part of your due diligence to review it, and maybe have your own engineer check it out and make sure it'll work, and see those designs and plans will come with an overall site plan that shows where the septic system is on the lot, where the house, the proposed dwelling is, where the well is going to go, because there are what are called setback requirements from the town, which are the distances that have to be between different things on the property, basically. So, a house has to be a certain amount of feet from the property line, and the septic system has to be a certain number of feet from the well and stuff like that. So the engineer will design all of that and create a site plan. And so obtaining that plan and reviewing it with your own engineer or your builder might be part of your due diligence.
I feel like some of my clients have come and, wanted to buy land and gotten even into an accepted offer situation, but they don't have a builder or an architect or an engineer yet. And I'm just wondering like what is there like a preferred order you think for doing that, or?
It's ideal to have those relationships in place, prior to starting your search for land, so that you can make the most of everyone's time, and save yourself time. Like, only look at pieces of land that your builder can vet with you. That's like, yep, I can build the house that you want on this piece of property, right? Because you might really like a particular piece of property, but the topography is not going to be conducive to building the house that you want to build. So it's important to, I think, have those relationships in place if at all possible.
I feel like we've triggered a lot of questions, but is there anything else folks wanted to say about the how of buying land before we go to those?
Did we hit everything on our list, Brooke?
We did. I think, a lot of people who are planning to move maybe permanently or need access to internet's another thing you want to just check in with, especially in the more rural mountainous areas. So just that was one thing you'll want to research as well.
Yeah,
and
that would be your due diligence, would be to call the internet company and find out how much it's going to cost to get your house wired, for sure.
I know we talked about too, that due diligence. So you would have an attorney at the same time. So you'd have your realtor working with you, helping to keep everything moving, an attorney who's working on your contract and getting title and municipal. But the buyer is doing a lot of the due diligence, like calling the town, calling the internet company. So we, as realtors, like help with some of that, and some ways like help guide you through the process. But it's really the buyer's role, right, to make many of those calls and figure that out, their own due diligence.
Yeah, I think it's important to underscore that there's a lot more legwork on the part of the buyer involved if you're buying land and building a house. As real estate agents, we can, like Hillary said, we can facilitate some of those contacts, but it's really on you as the buyer to confirm that this property is going to work for your express purposes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, should we jump to some of these?
Some good questions in here I think we could address.
Do you have one, Brooke, that you?
Yeah, the first one is in just reference, I think, to earlier on in the conversation, we were talking about building a home and sort of the rough amount it might cost per square foot to build in this time frame, and the time frame for that. And I think modular homes are getting really popular, and people are considering that as potentially a faster or more cost-effective approach.
And for the record.
So that was one of the questions. Modular
homes are not
faster?
necessarily any faster or any cheaper than a frame built home. We actually have, there was a developer that we were working with to, sell a home for him, and he had designed this house and was working with a modular company to do it. And it turned out to be much more expensive, and he's totally switched his design to do a stick built home because of that. So modular companies are having the same kind of shortages and materials and supply chain issues, that everyone is having. And so at this point in time, I know like at one point in time, it might have been an easier, faster thing to do, but they're having cost increases and delays as well.
Another question is, how do you know if a piece of land is good to buy without having the survey in hand?
I mean, you don't need a survey to know if you like a piece of land or not. So you'll be able to have the tax map, right, which is a rough boundary that the town has. So roughly what area it is that would be the parcel. You won't know the exact, property lines. You would need the survey for that. But you'll have a rough idea of like, okay, I think the property line is roughly here at this stone wall and it goes to the road. You'll have those rough things. And so you'll know where it is. You go there with your agent and look at it and know, like, if you like it, it's very subjective what's good, right? Like, is it maybe one person wants a lot that has views, right? So anything that doesn't have views would not be good to them. Or someone wants something that has a water feature. So if it doesn't have water on it, you won't even bother looking at it, So I think it's very personal and very subjective, like where the value in the land comes from. I will say that things like water features and views do add to the price of land because the market recognizes that those things are more valuable to some people.
What questions should a buyer ask an agent when looking at land?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not written expressly in the listing copy, I would say you should ask about any improvements that have been done to the land. The things like, the driveway, clearing the building site, trenching the electric in, put the septic engineering or anything like that. Any of those improvements that have been done will add to the value of the land, and you would want to know if they exist or not. So those are definitely questions to ask. You can ask for any existing survey. Like I said, they don't have to give it to you, but they usually do. You can ask for any other documentation that goes along with the land. It would be important to ask for things like easements or deed restrictions. So easements, there might be easements for maybe you share a driveway with a neighbor or something like that. And so there's a legal right of way to access the property. Or maybe there's a utility easement because the power lines go through the property or something like that. It's important to know about those things. What rights come along with the property, like mineral rights or riparian rights, or there's other, there's things that could add value to land for someone, and maybe not for someone else. Like maybe the mineral rights are really important to one person, but someone else has no idea that those exist. But you would want to know if there's any restrictions on those things. Like maybe the mineral rights have already been sold off in perpetuity to someone else and they don't transfer with the deed or something like that. It's like a weird thing you could run into.
I ran into,
yeah. Oh, you can
what was
go.
that?
I said lots of deed restrictions, but like, are you is there anything that you are not allowed to do on this property? I've definitely seen deed restrictions, especially in subdivisions, that say that you can only build a house of a particular size or appearance or something like that because they want to maintain the overall look and feel of the neighborhood in a certain way. So that's very common.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Just had an experience with that where there were restrictions on the size of the home, and it had to be a minimum of 900 square feet, which was, maybe totally changed the goal for the buyer in that case, who wanted to do something much more small. So, all right, moving on to the next question, because we've got quite a few good ones that have come through. And the next one here is, will the realtor typically know about the zoning for the parcel? So we can look that up.
I mean, the listing agent should definitely know what that is, and we can pull up the county report and the tax information, and it'll have what the zoning for the property is. Now, we do not memorize zoning codes. We don't know what that means, but we can give you the code, and you can call the town and you can ask them, what am I allowed to do with this? Like, this is zoned R3. What does that mean? They definitely provide you with the information.
The next question for that regarding zoning was, what is the impact of zoning, like schools, taxes, anything else?
So I think I mentioned it's basically like the rules about what you can and can't do with that piece of property, right? So it determines like you need a property of a minimum size of, let's call it like 2 acres in order to put a house on it. So if you subdivide off an acre of land from your 3-acre parcel, you can't do anything with that 1 acre of land anymore, right? It would just be a buffer, because by the zoning laws, you would not be able to put a house on it. So it kind of dictates what you can do with the land, and whether you're in a commercial zone or a residential zone or a farming zone or something like that. The allowable uses come under what that zone is.
Okay. Would a survey usually include a perc test, or is this separate?
Those are separate. They might be done by the same engineer's office, but those are totally separate things that you order separately, pay for separately, are done at different times.
Great.
The survey may have the site of the perc tests indicated on it, right? Like if they don't do full septic engineering and they just do a survey and they do the perk test, they'll show like the 3 holes and where they are on the property that they perked. And you can get the results and you'll know which place is going to be the best for putting in a septic, but that's kind of the only crossover there.
How do you establish relationships with the town if you're, or like the architect, the builder, all of that, if you're not living in the area?
I mean, if you work with us as your agents, we would be able to connect you to a lot of those people. We have a vast vetted vendor list of recommendations that we can connect you to in all the different areas that we cover. But if you work with someone else, I'm not sure if that person is going to help you.
We also have the Upstate Curious app.
Yes.
That's free and open to everyone. And there's a lot of great discussions that have already happened there. And we try to tag it so you can look up like Builder Kerhonkson or Builder Ulster or Delaware. So it's pretty nicely like searchable. So you might be able to find folks there. And then I was just going to say one thing about getting to know, I don't know if this is what somebody was saying, Brooke, but like town offices are usually very small. It kind of depends on, I'm in like a little more rural area out west, but it's like the building person isn't always there. Like the zoning person isn't always there. They often work like part-time Tuesday and Thursday morning. And you might be like trying to figure out the zoning before you put it in an offer. And it's like, it's going to take you a week or more sometimes to hear back from folks. Maybe they'll pick up the phone, but just know that it's like different size up here and people are very, you know, reachable in general, but it might take you a little bit longer.
Days.
Yeah. And don't be like, hey, why can't I get its answer? Because then you're going to ruin your relationship with that person too. And you might need them. So just remember there's a lot of small towns up here and everybody's human and it might take a minute.
Sometimes it's one person wearing multiple hats.
Or one person working across 4 towns. Like they're the zoning person for each town in the whole area.
Very true. Good advice. All right. So can you explain the septic perk test a little bit more? Is it because it's wetter there? This question is coming in from Colorado.
I don't know what they do in Colorado. Maybe they just have sewers everywhere. So the perk test is literally a test, like Hillary said, to test how fast or how slowly water moves through the ground. So an excavator will dig a hole and then they'll put water in it and they'll see how like it fills and drains. So there's an ideal rate for a septic system to drain into particular types of soil, right? And the engineer is going to design your septic system with a certain number of holes in the perforated pipes and a certain length of perforated pipe to control the rate that the water enters the ground. I hope that was enough.
Yeah. Whether the soil is made up of, you know, different materials, there's a lot of like areas that have stone here, which will change the rate. Sand, clay. Maybe clay for sure. And I think, yeah, you could just imagine. So even in a small area, all these different counties or even within the local towns, you may have different soils with different perk tests or perk rates. Let's see. Do you think the cost per acre is going to go down this year or still remain high?
Still remain high. So given the limited inventory in homes, like we see, you know, the total number of homes on the market declining over, you know, we've seen that over the last year. It doesn't seem like it's going up. There's only so many homes up here that can, you know, change hands. So a lot of people are turning to building, you know, because they can't find what they want in, you know, an existing home. And so land is becoming more valuable in that regard because it's also a limited commodity. So I don't see the price of land going down in the very near future.
What are the best sites to go on to look at land or lots that are available? I'd say the same ones you can sort within whatever existing sites that you're using to research real estate. Typically, there's a filter where you can just reduce everything to lots or land. And so that's how I think, and unless one of you have an idea of like a particular app
No, I mean, all of
or which
the,
site?
any piece of land that's listed on an MLS is going to show up on the consumer facing sites. So you'll see it. I would say there's also tax sales that you can check out that like happen once a year in every town. So the town will essentially like repossess a home or a piece of land where they haven't paid the real estate taxes on it. And then they'll sell it at an auction. So that's another good place, but be wary of those. They can sometimes come with title issues.
And I think a lot of people ask if we have like access to other information, and we do have access to other information on the MLS, but most, like Angelica said, most of like Zillow, Realtor, all those apps are pulling from the different MLSs and also the Upstate Curious site. So once you find something, we can go then as your realtor to like look on the MLS to see if there's any agent notes. So we do have access to some information that's not on those apps, but it's not like there's some like hidden world of lots that only realtors have access to. You really are seeing kind of what's out there in those apps, and then we can kind of help you dig deeper and then reach out to the listing agent to find out more.
That's right. And sometimes in the MLS, when we're in the site, we can find that there might be attached documents that would show like sort of any restrictions or a survey that's already existing or anything like that. So all right, on to the next one. Do you have to offer full cash or is 50% possible for a land deal?
Anything's possible. Very few lenders offer loan products to finance land. It's not a great asset for a bank to have. So a lot of them don't do it. So you'll just have to ask around if that's going to be your only option. Most people use cash.
Can you talk about land purchase financing versus building cost financing? So maybe we're looking at like, a construction loan.
Again, a lot of lenders don't offer construction loans either. We have, lenders that we can recommend if that's the direction you want to go, who do offer construction financing. And that's kind of a totally different loan product. Again, so totally different lenders are going to have those loan products.
So Angelica, in that case that you were to take that direction, you would still buy the land on its own, right? And then get a construction loan, or would that be?
So, well, normally I think there might be some lenders that will roll the whole thing into one thing, but there's a lot of factors that go into that, like the appraised value of the house that you're going to build and the value of the land and like the LTV that the bank is going to give you and all of that stuff. So it's really important to go talk to the lenders about all of this stuff because we are not lenders. But construction financing, generally the bank will not lend you a construction loan on land that you do not own. So you have to take title generally to the land first in order to get the construction financing. So you just have to talk to the lender about how they structure that and what their advice is on how to navigate that.
Yeah, someone just put, Rory put in the chat, like they've heard you can use buy land in cash and then use that land as a down payment for the construction.
Yeah, basically the purchase of the land then becomes your equity in the home. So if the bank is going to lend you 70% of the overall cost, your 30% down would be the price of the land.
Let's see here. How would you know? Okay, so someone's asking again about zoning. How would you know which schools that a piece of land would be zoned for?
That's on the county report. We can show you that.
So what's the school district? I think people are getting like zone and district, like using it the same way. So zoning, when we talk about zoning, we talk a little bit, what Angelica was saying before is like, what are the allowable uses of a piece of land and the regulations around it? And then you would look for the school districts if that's important to you, which you can find on the county report. And you also, regular human being, have access to county tax reports. So you can just Google like the county name and tax report, and there'll usually be some kind of portal or map system where you can look up some basic information on the house.
All publicly available data.
It's also, I believe, listed typically within a Zillow listing, like what we see in Zillow or on Realtor or Upstate Curious website. It will still say usually like what school district property that's being sold is located in. that right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
see it sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes the agent will put that in.
There's another question that is, could a construction loan be then turned into a mortgage?
Yeah, I mean, you'll just talk to a lender again, but typically those do turn into something, just a construction to permanent loan is what they're called. It's very common.
And does the construction loan cover the driveway, the septic, all of these different costs that we were talking about with the land purchase, or would those costs be paid in cash?
Yeah, those are typically rolled into the construction loan. And some builders will kind of just give you like, this is the flat cost for the whole thing. And then they just kind of break it down evenly. And so it's not necessarily going to be the same for everyone. And it's going to depend on how your lender wants to structure the loan and the payouts.
And then there is a question here that says, could you recommend some lenders that offer construction loans? We do have, I think, do we have some lenders that do offer that as a product?
We do. But it kind of depends where you are, right? Like here in Ulster County, we like Rondout Savings Bank and Ulster Savings Bank. They both offer nice construction products. But yeah, it depends on where you're building. It's nice to work with the local banks since they do a lot of this. They are very familiar with the process. They've been working with builders in the area on these things a lot. So we always recommend to check out the local lenders.
I think we've gotten through our questions at this point. So
crazy. It was a long list of questions.
Last call, or if anybody wants to ask it live, or we also have other agents from our team here, both from the listing and buying side. So I don't know if anybody has a cool story or question or something they want to talk about.
A-frames.
Rory just wrote A-frames. I don't know what that means.
What about A-frames, Rory? Is it a lower cost approach?
Depends on size.
Depends on how tall your A is, how wide it is. It's still a house and you still need all that site prep, right? Unless you're trying. Oh, we did talk about off-grid. Brooke, you mentioned that in our prep too. I don't know if we want to talk about that. So what if we're talking about an off-grid A-frame or small house? Does that make any difference?
There's still labor costs. I mean, there's still site prep, regardless of whether or not you're going to use electric. Then, I mean, you might have extra costs to set up solar panels or wind turbines or whatever you're going to do. So,
yeah. If you mean off-grid,
is a builder or designer or architect to come up with something that's going to be easy to build and lower cost. They can definitely they know how to construct a house to minimize costs. And can anyone get a construction loan, or do you have to have a builder? You have to have a builder.
I think that same person asked if they could be their own general contractor.
You'd have to talk to the bank.
Rory's asking if there are local A-frame companies.
Not that I'm aware of.
Me either. And then there's a comment that those prep costs are not part of the 350 per square foot that you'd mentioned earlier, right? That's correct.
Yeah.
Right? Those prep costs for the land to get it prepared to put a home are completely separate costs.
Yeah. I mean, you might find a builder who kind of rolls it all into one. Like I said before, different builders price things differently. But when I gave that number out there, that's a number I got from a builder that, we know and trust and who does a lot of work in Ulster County. And that's the number he gave me. That would not include those costs.
What's the best way to look for builders in the area?
The Upstate Curious app is a great place to go to ask for recommendations. And then I would say, it depends too. There's different options, right? You can buy plans and then just get a builder, or GC to build and execute those plans. You can work with an architect to design an entirely custom home. You could design your own home and then work with a structural engineer to create the plans and stamp the plans and do all of the other stuff involved and that you need to get the building permit. There's a lot of different ways to go. You could work with a design build firm, who will do the custom design and everything with you and then have the crew to build it as well. So there's a lot of different options.
I think a lot of people come to us thinking they have to get an architect, but you don't necessarily. It's more if you want a custom build, there are a lot of plans available or general contractors who have plans or access to plans, right? That you don't need to.
You don't necessarily need an architect.
No.
Any experience with cabins or the builds from Den?
I don't think I've had anyone buy or sell any properties that have Den
Mm-mm.
stuff on them.
Same. Yeah.
Anything else or anything from our team?
Oh, new question.
Eh,
Tinder for builders. Wish. I mean, a lot of builders who have a lot of experience have a website, right, where they have photos of like previous projects and stuff. So you can definitely look, and then you can just call them and be like, hey, I really like this particular style of home. Do you do that? Or yeah, I mean, a lot of people have websites. So that would probably be the best way to look at pictures of what they've done before.
But if someone builds a Tinder for builders app, you probably make a lot of money.
We are familiar with huts. Yeah, Huts is a great company. They're really cool. I have a client who's closing on a piece of land tomorrow and building a home on that with Huts. Client has been super happy with that relationship thus far. So I think yeah, that's a great direction to go.
Yeah, I have a client too who's working with Huts, so I don't have a lot of info on it, but I know one of them is a designer, and they kind of did initial designs and are working with Huts on making that work, with probably building off of one of their plans or something.
There's nothing else.
Oh, that was pretty thorough.
Yeah, we can wrap it up, and you can always send any of us an email if you have any questions that come up later, if you want to work with someone on our team to help you find a great piece of land.
Does Scott have info on how to reach out to us, or just you can go through the upstatecurious.com site, right?
Yeah, you can actually read about all of us on the website and reach out to us directly through upstatecurious.com.
Thanks for all your great questions, everyone.
Yeah, this became very thorough. I hope that we said some helpful things and gave you some helpful information to get you on your journey to your dream home.
Yeah. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks all.